I'm Zayna Khayat. I'm a applied health futurist, and I'm based in Toronto, Canada.
Thanks, Zayna. It's great to be able to see you here at HIMSS Europe and making the trip from Canada. What brings you to HIMSS Europe here in Paris?
So, good foresight from HIMSS. They wanted to create space to introduce this idea that every health organization, whether you're a startup, a VC, a big system, is or will develop competency in futurism. So that was my keynote yesterday, just to kind of introduce that idea. How does it work? How do you do it? How do you get started? Everybody will need to be some type of a futurist to be able to, survive, let alone kind of thrive in what's coming in the future of health.
It's interesting you say the application of or a competency of futurism within organizations, because when I think a futurist, it could be someone that's pontificating about what's happening in the next 5-10 years. But I feel like at the rate of change that's happening in healthcare at the moment, predicting beyond, I don't know, like
6 months.
6 months feels like kind of just
you're
chucking stuff up there. And I'm not sure of the value that you can get from that. But for an organization to invest in a competency, you kind of need to see tangible elements of that. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about bringing those two worlds together, I guess, of looking ahead to the future and innovation and things, but also then investing from an organization level, which sometimes needs a lot of demonstrable ROI.
Yeah, and that's a bit of what I talked about in the keynote. So just to be clear, and I could see why the automatic assumption, just because of some history with people called futurists, I definitely do not pontificate. I don't predict. There is a space for that some people do. I think impossible, I would agree. So it's much more around, I'd say healthcare more uniquely than any other sector. There are so many problems of today. Like they will say, people will die if I don't deal with the problems today. There's this kind of mission orientation, so many fires to put out. It's almost impossible to look up and out.
Yeah.
So that when you're making bets today, they're at least consistent with the ever unfolding future. And it can unfold, like you said, in any direction. The amount of skill and craft that takes, it is just a lacking competency because nowism is endemic in our sector. And so, if at best you can get to 10% of your capacity is futurism dominated by nowism, I'm winning, right? And that's kind of the mission I'm on.
Well, if I think about organizations that have a lot of healthcare to do right now, often their strategic priorities or their direction is often determined by the regulation landscape. How are things going to get paid? Or like here's a policy or whatever that gives us a goalpost to be able to build a roadmap against or to build workflows towards or funding model, whatever it might be. Often those things don't come around very quickly. So I feel like sometimes in healthcare, that's where a lot of the stagnation happens. It's like, well, we can't really do anything just yet because the government hasn't determined the standards for this or this and that. So there's, I guess, to apply a strategic kind of lens to actually have progress while still sometimes not quite knowing, because I think the biggest concern that organizations might have is if we start going in this direction, what if we've got a few degrees off, and then how do we
exactly? Yeah, and what futurism isn't saying, I've decided this is the future I want, and I'm going to do the pieces of the the Lego blocks to get me there. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about having a working point of view informed by a ton of intelligence and data. Not a ton. Intelligence and data, it's no different from old school strategic planning of getting the facts, but the facts about the futures that might evolve, and there's a science to it. So you can just fan out and look at, okay, if these set of factors combine, like AI gets adopted at the rate we think, tariffs materialize, you can intersect a bunch of trends. It's not just technology. If this scenario plays out, is what we're doing today fit for that world? If this scenario plays out, is our choice today fit for that world? Oh, if this scenario plays out, is that the one we want to deliver on mission? Oh, maybe I will add the things to go in that direction. So that's all it is. And I think what I'm finding is the old preservative tactics is what I call what you just described, but government, but money, but regulation, was just all classic status quo preservation. Kind of doesn't take a lot of courage to do, and no one can really argue with that. But I'm finding our incumbent health orgs, whether that's, life sciences, care delivery, government, that's also not working for them. They're getting kind of diminishing returns on all this effort, and you're still sludging up a hill anyway. So I'm finding futurism is unleashing kind of this like hope and possibility and a little bit of a chance to be the protagonist of your own future instead of just going at the whims of whatever the hell government does. And then my last thing I always say, if the first answer is, but we're not funded for that, and then I'm like, do you think the first time any innovation happens, it's because government decided to fund it? Yeah. They're last. Yeah. They're the scale factor. They are never going to be the initiator. So do you want to be in mission of health? Then you got to go create that future and create the market, which is what entrepreneurs do. Like, that's what we do, you know? But incumbents aren't used to that. So it does provide a methodology to start to get into that space without calling it the big bad word called innovation, which seems like so ominous. It's like, no, we're just going to be the protagonist of our own future. Let's go get it. Love that.
You started to touch on my next train of thought, which is a common approach that perhaps, say, large-scale enterprise or institutions might take towards let's be innovative would be an approach of let's bring in the startup community, the entrepreneurs to be able to do things. And there's, that brings opportunity and challenges and it creates a certain environment. What's your take on how very large organizations and perhaps even global organizations take an approach to be nimble and agile and innovative and are we doing it right at the moment?
Look, I teach an entire MBA course called Healthcare Innovation where I present the answer to that question over a 13-week semester course. 2 minutes. And then including I give my students the chance to go into the field to meet these incumbent enterprises and critique and appraise how they have or haven't based on their stated intentions for innovation. So the answer quickly is there's a whole gamut of methodologies you can pursue. Some end up doing external innovation, which is embedding in startup ecosystem. Some do internal, some do a hybrid. I mean, there's a whole set of frameworks. So I'd say I don't have a point of view of which one works when. It just has to be fit for purpose. But what I will say is I do find there is a ton of what I call innovation theater. So it's like we all feel good about ourselves that we declared we're doing innovation. We appointed a chief innovation officer. We created this beautiful space with beanbag chairs, and it's usually lime green.
A nice PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, we signed an MOU with the startup accelerator. Maybe we even made a venture fund. And I just find so doing those actions is starting to get a little tiresome and minimal return. And then, it all gets basically taken away once that chief innovation officer leaves because they got no results and then the whole thing falls apart. So I would say more of have a working point of view of the vision of what you want, which should be on an impact level, not like we want to be the number one X in the world. I think that's old thinking of the incumbents. And then you be obsessed about that result you want for your constituents. And then massively flexible on how you get there. And one way you might get there is through this methodology called innovation, but it's not the way. And startups might be a thing, but to me, tech as the starting point, I think is a very dangerous, slippery slope.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting point in itself, but I wanted to cover another thought train I had where in different parts of probably anywhere in the world, to be honest, the number one challenge in healthcare systems is cost containment and the budgets to be able to do anything. And as you kind of alluded to anyway, is that often in those types of environments, the first things to go will be innovation. Let's just get really good at what we do right now, and then maybe later we can invest in innovation. Is it always the way that in order to think innovative or take a futurist approach within any setting, it needs it's costly? Or because I often take the thinking that constraint drives creativity, that when you've got less of a canvas and less to work with, that's when you really start to work out how to take an innovative approach towards something. I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
I mean, I think there's also again this general view that innovation equals tech, which is I guess completely flawed, and then tech equals procurement, which means I have to create money to buy the tech. I'm like, if that's your train of thought, you're done. It's not going to work, right? So I think that just one mind frame is, the normal kind of basic, like the arithmetic or the calculus of any enterprise, whether you're a nonprofit, for-profit, publicly traded, not publicly traded, 6 people, 20,000 people, it doesn't matter.
20,000.
Is about 20,000, is that, roughly 10% of whatever is your working operating capital, revenue, whatever it is, should be, focused on blowing up what you're doing now and creating the next thing, because what you're doing now will not be here. It shouldn't. There's constant industrial mutation. And I would say in healthcare, on average, weighted average in delivery, it's about 0%. There's just nothing. There's no margin left to squeeze. Tech budgets alone, foundational tech, a good, modern organization, again, whether you're in agriculture, education, consumer retail, about 10%, 7 to 10 should be your tech stack, because tech replaces labor and capital. That's the only way you can be efficient and agile, as you said. Healthcare sits at what? 2% is tech, 3%. So there's some debt to fill, but I wouldn't be thinking about your resources for innovation. It's just your methodology to continue to be relevant to your customers.
Yeah.
There's no other way. And now with the amount of change coming, I actually think you need to be doubling down relative to what it's been the last 10 years.
I'd hope that kind of helps reframe, or at least get because we go down. It's a similar rhetoric all the time in terms of let's do innovation or let's cut back because we need to. And they're the two trains of thought. So that's super interesting.
Yeah, simple, just so R&D for pharma, say, is built into their business model. Could you imagine if pharma saying, our drug went off patent this year, so we're just going to stop doing R&D? You would never do that. Yeah. Car companies, they would never stop designing the next car because it's their business model. I think that's the frame we're going to finally get to on care delivery.
Amazing. And so, here at something like HIMSS Europe, the attendees, it's a good mix of anyone from at a C-suite level right through to the front line of healthcare. Are there things that individuals who've attended HIMSS Europe can do within their setting, even if they're not the strategic lead for, a large institution or anything, in your day-to-day role, how do you apply some of this thinking when you might feel like, my job is just to do this? How does anyone take a more innovative approach?
Oh, so I always say, as an applied futurist, I guide individuals. So whether you're like a single shingle physician with your own practice, or you're the analyst on the financial services team in the huge hospital. So individuals, organizations, and then again, systems or governments or whatever it is. And at any of those levels, like kind of micro, meso, macro, there is ways to apply this way of working. So when I work with individuals, it's very easy. I just did one last week or this week. Somebody came and asked me about it. There is a way to kind of at least have a formative view of what futures might emerge in the area you work on. Like whether that's, again, if you're the, data person, or you're a startup founder, or a clinician, and then you can then have an honest, sober conversation with yourself about, is the choices I'm making today, the things I'm doing, whether that's for my professional development, for my department, for my team, going to put me on track to the one I want, or, repel me from the one I don't. You could do that every day, any day. And I do 20-minute workshops with people on personal futurism.
Yeah.
So very, very possible. Lots of tools out there.
Yeah. Lastly, what would you hope that attendees who checked out your keynote or some of the other sessions that you did would take away to apply in their practice today?
Again, futurism will be the next core competency of healthcare. One of the analogs I gave is, remember chief innovation officers? They did not exist in healthcare, I'm going to say 12, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Now everyone has one. Yeah. Then it was chief medical information officers. The clinician. Then it was chief information security officers, the CISO. Then it was chief data officers. Now everyone's recruiting a chief AI officer. Whether it's a chief futurist, it doesn't matter if it's a person, but the capability and the competency built into the day-to-day is coming. And so why don't you be the one to lead it versus, adapt it a little bit later when you're already at a competitive disadvantage.